Hi, this is John with John's Workshop. Welcome back to another edition. Today we're going to be talking about the S65 AMG here. This is the car that I got back in 2019. Memorial Day of 2019 is when I got it, and I haven't really driven it a lot because of the COVID thing, but I did get the message in the instrument cluster about the auxiliary battery malfunction, which basically just means the battery is drained, the small battery. So I started pursuing what it takes to change that. It's relatively easy, but initially I went off track and I got the wrong directions. I want to show you a little bit about that, and then I'm also going to show you some of the interesting modules in the trunk once you get the carpeting out of there. So initially I pulled this up from the work instructions, and you can see here the problem I had was that this is only up to the this is basically the 1st of June of 08. And so that was my mistake. I didn't read that. So I started going after the auxiliary battery, which in those models is back here in the back of the trunk. So I ended up taking a bunch of the carpeting out and stuff, which revealed some kind of interesting modules back there, but I didn't have the battery. So what I really should have done is use the correct one. And this is the correct procedure. You can see here, this is the 221 as of, and this one's 2nd of June of 08. So since I've got a 2012, this is the one I should have been using. And in this case, the battery is right up here in the instrument cluster on the dash on the driver's side. Real easy to get to. I'm going to leave a link to a guy who's already done a real nice video out there on YouTube. I'm going to leave a link to that down below, but it's pretty straightforward. So this is what they call the additional battery. It's not the same as the battery in what they call the two battery system. That was the older design, and in that aft battery, it's actually a big, kind of a regular lead acid battery. This is a lead acid battery, but it's sealed in a pretty small unit here. And this is the guy that basically after a while gets low on its voltage. And I'll show you the voltage here. Okay, so just using the multimeter here, you can see the voltage is 12.49. They say that this needs to be at least 12.6, and so you can see we're not there. So this battery is not good. The battery that I replaced this with had a 12.75 volts right before I put it in the car. So this is where the battery is located. You actually have to get to it from under here. That link in the section below will show you that guy's nice video of how to do it. But basically you pull this off, you loosen a bolt here. There's a bracket that holds this. You pull it down, pull the old one off, put the new one on, reconnect the electrical connections and put it back. It's really fairly straightforward. I think it probably takes half an hour or something, and so I'd highly recommend doing it yourself if you're up for the challenge. In my pursuit of the wrong battery, so that would be the auxiliary battery. So in the two battery system on the earlier cars, the official work instructions called it an auxiliary battery, and that's the lead acid battery that was in the back, kind of a larger one. Trying to pursue what I thought was the right battery, I pulled all the stuff out of the trunk, and I was just going to share with you a little bit of a trick on how to get this. This was probably the hardest panel to get out. This is the one that's all the way in the front, and in the work instructions it says you just start at the top here and you kind of pull it out, and they're kind of right, but you kind of have to mess around with it a little bit. It's got these things right here that kind of get caught in a little well in the forward part of the trunk there. So you really can't pull the bottom of it out. You're really stuck pulling from the left hand, kind of pulling it out, pulling it out, pulling it out, and finally the whole thing comes out. And that's like the first step, is to get that out. But if you're actually going to take that lead acid battery out and you have one of the older cars, you really have to take all of the carpeting out, because there's this frame here that sits in the trunk like this, and that basically, if you shove your big suitcase in or something, prevents things from shoving on into the electronics in there. This frame, in order to get this out, it's caught in the top carpeting, so you have to take the top carpeting out. In order to get the top carpeting out across the bottom of the trunk right under here, you have to get the two sides out. So essentially, to get this out, you got to take all the carpeting out, and that's how I end up getting everything out of here. So I'm going to show you some of the things that are in here and why it actually was kind of interesting to get all these pieces of carpet out, particularly on a used car like this, to get a good look at what was in there. Removing these side carpet pieces here is pretty straightforward. I should have probably showed some video on that, but I tried to keep this fairly short. There's only a couple of little of these connectors right here. You kind of pull the inside part out, and then the outer part comes out. It's kind of a jam fastener, and this is basically what they look like right here. So you pull that middle part out, and then that allows you to kind of compress this, where you don't really compress it, you just pull this out and it comes right out. So getting these out is pretty straightforward. You do have a couple of Torx right here and right here that need to come out too, but the reason I wanted to show you this is because you do have to take this piece out. That sort of is trapping these this either side of the carpet there, so this does have to come out. It's pretty straightforward too, but I just thought I'd show you on the inside. Really, you just have these two, same kind of a connector, just like this on the sides, but then when you get those out, it still doesn't want to come out, and the reason is because it's got these fasteners here that are just kind of jammed in these holes here, and so you just have to kind of get a little bit of leverage, kind of pull up on those things, and make sure you're on a warm day so the plastic is not real cold, and then they just, for me anyways, they just pop right out, and this piece came right out of here. But I did want to point out that does have to come out in order to get the two side carpet pieces out. This is what the trunk looks like without the carpeting in it in my S65. So I thought I'd walk around here and just kind of show you what is what in here. It's kind of interesting. This is, both of these boxes here are for the radio. In the manual it talks about one of these being a 6-channel amplifier and one of them being a 16-channel amplifier, but these both go to the radio. Then notice here there's a whole empty slot, so there's evidently an option that could have been checked off on this car, but it wasn't. So that's an interesting observation there. And one of the things I was noticing as I was just looking through here is everything looks very clean in here. So, having bought a used car, you always wonder a little bit about the history, but boy, this looks pristinely clean in here. I don't see any evidence of water. And then let's see, continuing on around, oh yeah, this little module here is the camera controller for the camera in the trunk that looks aft for parking. And then in the forward part of the trunk here, there's some interesting things. So this part right here is a pump for the automatic door closers. It's basically an air pump. And then under here, I found a part number on this module here. This is the voice and telephone recognition, so voice command section. And this would have been where the battery was. In fact, I ended up taking these screws off, still looking for the battery, but this whole section pulls out, and the battery was supposedly going to be in here somewhere. But on this car, there's no battery back here, as you can see, and I was disappointed to find out that after all that work, there was no battery. But that's kind of why I'm making this video, is so if you're trying to do that same thing, you don't make that same mistake. But just looking through here in the trunk, you can see everything looks very clean. There's no rust or anything. You hear that? This is, oh yeah, I should have mentioned this black plastic piece up here. That's a reservoir. So the air pump pumps pressure into that, and then you've got pressure sitting there waiting. You don't have to keep running the pump whenever you go to use the door closers. So coming around this side of the trunk here, you see there's a big module here. This is actually for the rear seat control. So controls massaging seats and all the features in the aft seats. This here is another air pump. It has these two pressure lines that run up through here, and they go to this cylinder here. If you can see that, that cylinder is the actuator for the trunk. So you've got a line kind of on either side of this piston, which then drives that back and forth to open and close the trunk. So that's what that is. This is, you can see like an insulated box here just to keep the sound down. There's also a CAN bus junction here. This is kind of just sitting in here, but you can see just got a number of connections there. You can see an intelligent CAN interface. So got that in there. There's a couple other things. This looks like a junction box here. I didn't actually find a part number for that. There's a box behind here. You can kind of see it here. This has pitch, roll, and yaw gyros in it, which the traction control system uses to see whether they think the car is getting out of control or not. So lots of electronics back here. And what I like seeing is the fact that this is all dry. There's no signs of any kind of damage back here, you know, from any kind of a rear end collision. But this all looks very clean. You can see here, you can see even the, you know, the original paint here. That this gets hidden by there's a cover here to kind of make it look nice. Another couple things here. This you can see is that's an accumulator for the ABS system in the rear. I'm sorry, not the ABC system. And so that's what this is. And I think there's one other thing I was going to point out. Underneath here, you can't really see it from here, but there's a Sirius radio module for satellite radio. So that's kind of a quick overview of all the various different things that you can see in the trunk. And boy, if you're going to do a pre-purchase inspection, it sure would be good to, you know, take a look in here and just make sure that things are clean and undamaged. But I feel a lot better about buying this used car now that I've seen in here and I see that there's no hidden damage. Oh yeah, another thing I wanted to point out here while we were talking about this actuator was in these springs that drive the trunk closed, notice there's a piece of foam in there just to prevent any kind of rattling. And you can see that on both sides here. So there was quite a bit of attention in here to sound deadening material, you know, which is, you can see a piece of it here glued onto the outer, or I guess the inner side of the outer quarter panel there. And so the, you know, ride comfort and quietness is certainly a big focus here. You know, again, this piece here is all meant to deaden sound. So you can tell the Mercedes engineers were very focused on that aspect of things. Over here, you can see there's this, they've taped a baggie onto the ground wires here, and there's a couple spare fuses in here, and then some, this is like a kind of a connector where you could plug it into a fuse. I know you can't see it very well here, sorry the lighting's bad. You can plug it into a fuse slot, and then you got a spade connector on either side, almost like to pull power off or to check current flow through a particular fuse. So interesting that the factory taped those things there, and so it's all ready for debugging, I guess, any of the fuses here in the back. Another thing to check on while you're in the trunk is some of these ground locations here. These actually look real good in the car that I've got here, but you never know. Those can be pretty tough problems to find if all of a sudden your grounds for all those wires aren't really grounded. So if you've had moisture in the trunk or anything like that, while you're in here, you might just double check those, make sure they all look like they're making good connection, and if not, then just get in there and clean them a little bit, maybe add a little grease. I also wanted to point this thing out right here. This is actually part of the ventilation system, and there's, you can kind of hardly see them in here, but there's like little rubber flapper valves here. You can kind of see it there. So essentially the airflow from in the car is intended to kind of come through here and actually exit the vehicle here. So if the car is just a little bit pressurized, the air works its way kind of through the body and out these vents. There's one on either side in the back here in the trunk. Here's something else I wanted to show you guys. Well, I was digging around looking for this battery service information. I also found this This is quiescent current characteristics after you lock the vehicle. And so here you can see that it's going to be taking 6,000 milliamps after the, for just the first minute and so on. And down here after 6 minutes, it's drawing 50 milliamps, which maybe doesn't sound like much, but if you multiply that out for, let's say you don't drive your car for a month, you could be looking at, say, 36 or so amp hours, which potentially could drain your battery pretty significantly. So if you're like me and you don't drive your car every day, maybe just take it out nice weather, and it could be a month in between, definitely want to have a trickle charger of some sort on the car. Because of that current draw, I usually keep the hood up when the car's in the garage. I've got a battery tender here I just have hooked onto the battery, and that supplies that 50 milliamps or so that the car is always drawing off the battery. So especially if you're going to keep your car, say, sitting a month or so between drives, which in the wintertime, certainly around here, I tend to do that. But this way, your battery is good. It really never drops. And so I would highly recommend that if you've got one of the newer cars like this that has a lot of electronics in there that do suck some current from the battery while it's just sitting there. Okay, that's it for this edition. Thanks for watching. I hope it was helpful. I've got a couple videos coming up. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I found this car and the history of it, so it'll be an upcoming video on that. And then also on a low car like this, how to easily get it up off the ground to do an oil change. So if you like what you saw, hit the subscribe button and hope to see you again soon. Thanks.